right here. Yeah. Thank you very much, you
Here we
guys.
are,
Thank you very much.
You always know that you have to do
I think we can move along and we get to the meat of this and why you're all here, which I'm sure is not just to see me. Although that would be nice if it was, that you were here just to see me. Welcome to our briefing about the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. I know there is a lot of questions, there are a lot of misunderstandings, and we are here to set the record straight on what is the most accurate information we have to date on the effects of what's going to happen at the end of this month. Okay? What I want you to try and do is I want you to try and not be distracted by a lot of misinformation that's probably floating around right now. We're going to give you point of contact information. You're going to meet a few people here besides myself today that we hope, if you're part of this local community, that you'll go ahead and you'll contact those people before you jump to assumptions, especially if some of you represent associations or people that come to you for that information. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, I don't really know, let's get to the people who do. And the gentleman here, Supervisor Wesley Parsons, he is our area expert. He just returned back from Washington. He got the most up-to-date briefing. Now, if things change between now and then, which is entirely possible, we hope it does not, we will try and get that information out to you. And of course, Sue and Gary here at the Chamber have been very instrumental in trying to get those things going. For those who maybe don't know me, my name is Eric Kipko. I'm the Acting Assistant Port Director for Trade. Mr. Perry is away on detail. He asked me to be here on his behalf today. Before we get started, I would like to recognize we have a few folks here that I think I should mention. We have Ms. Mary Marshall here, the Consul General from Montreal, in the United States. We have Mr. Claude Béchon here, MP, local riding. We have Teresa Sayward from the New York State Assembly, also here. I know we've had some press here. I would only ask the press that we're not going to accept direct questions for the press or any press release until after this event at 10:30, and we'll address those separately. If indeed you want to get stock footage of that here, that's perfectly fine, but this is part of the public forum. So if you have any questions, concerns, or specific things you need to have addressed, we're going to do that after the general meeting. Okay, so we can get started. I'm going to introduce, this is Wesley Parsons. He's a Supervisory Customs and Border Protection Officer. He is very skilled on admissibility issues and things directly related to WHTI, so he's the guy to ask today that you have him here. So I'm going to let him take this out. He's got a brief presentation, and then he's going to talk to you more about it. Okay, thank you.
We're going to ask if you don't mind signing a list so we know that who was in attendance. By the way, this is my immediate supervisor, Chief McMullen, passenger processing. Essentially, we're the people that are in the lobby at the main port of entry when people pass through. So if you're looking for me, that's where I will be. I'm just going to give a general overview about a few things. Then we're going to do a quick PowerPoint slideshow presentation. My and all of our intentions here today are to try and dismiss some of the rumors that are out there floating around, and making sure that you have accurate information for your associations, for your peers, your friends, your families, and that you're helping get the word out what it is that happens on December 31st, and then we'll discuss a little bit about final implementation of Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. I'd like to thank the Chamber for allowing us in today to use your facilities. It's been very helpful. So thank you again in that regard. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. I prefer to keep this as informal as we possibly can. The last slide that I will put up will have the CBP website, the State Department travel document website, and my email address and my phone number where you can reach me. If you're trying to get a hold of me, I would recommend that you do it through email, because I don't take shifts and days off. That being said, I'm the primary point of contact, but if you call the main lobby number, there's always a supervisor there that will be able to provide you the accurate information. But if it's something that's not necessarily urgent, by all means, send me an email and I will respond to that. So again, we're here to discuss the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative as it applies to the land and sea environment. The airport has already done their things. So we're going to stress what it is that happens at our land borders, essentially, especially the Champlain area, ports of entry, what we're going to be looking at. We, again, are looking for your assistance in getting the word out as to what it is that's required. We are not anticipating a major event on the 31st of January. This is going to be a non-event. We already have a very high number of Canadian and U.S. travelers that possess WITI compliant travel documents, mainly passports. I'm not going to refer to the final implementation of WITI as the passport date, because that's kind of a misnomer. Passports are one document that are WITI compliant, but there are other options out there, and there are more going to be coming available. Ms. Marshall is going to be talking about the passport card, which will be produced this spring in April. Enhanced driver's licenses are coming. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. A passport may not necessarily be the best document for somebody to use and come across in final implementation. So we'll talk about what it is that people need during the transition phase, which is October 31st, 2008, to the final implementation of the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. Final implementation is scheduled, or may begin as early as June 1st, 2009. That's where it stands right now. So it may begin as early as June 1st, 2009. Between the 31st of January, 2008, and the final implementation, this is a transition period. It is not WITI. During this transition period, we will be educating the public, educating the travelers as to what it is that will be required during the transition phase, as well as the final WITI implementation, with the end goal being that when WITI is finally implemented in its final version, that everybody is in compliance and has a valid document as prescribed by WITI. Okay? During the transition period, we will not be dealing heavy-handedly with people at ports of entry. Never, ever will a U.S. citizen, even under the final implementation of WITI, be refused admission to the United States. If you're a U.S. citizen and you do not have your passport, and you forgot your birth certificate with your driver's license during the transition phase, you will not be refused entry back into the United States. We need to make sure that people understand that. Okay? Our procedures are very clear. Our officers are being trained on what are acceptable documents and what the correct and professional course of action is for them to take the primary inspection to facilitate people back into the U.S. or Canadians that are presumed to be otherwise admissible by the officer on the line to expedite their entry into the U.S. Keep in mind that WITI, the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, only applies to U.S. and Canadian citizens. It has no other impact. So we need, from our perspective, our job doesn't change in regards to immigrants or what documents they need to carry, whether or not somebody's a permanent resident of the U.S., if they're a visitor under the visa waiver program. None of that changes for us. It's just Canadians and U.S. citizens. And obviously we're here because the people that we know and that we work with and that we represent are Canadians and U.S. citizens. That's our audience in this particular area. Any questions about that so far? Okay. Essentially, the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative ends oral declarations of citizenship. Beginning on the 31st of January, travelers will have to be able to document their citizenship. They will have to be documented in a form that is acceptable under WITI. Whether it's a final rule accepted WITI compliant document, or it's as simple as a driver's license and a birth certificate, or a government issued photo ID and proof of citizenship. No more oral false claims. Okay? That's what this is all about. WITI essentially was a recommendation of the 9/11 Commission report. I'm sure that many of you have looked at this, read excerpts from this. It's a good read. A lot of our mandates that have gone into effect since 9/11 have been directly recommended by the 9/11 Commission. And it's pretty well universally accepted as being, the authority on where we need to go to tighten things up. So certain elements of the 9/11 report have been placed into the WITI, and that is what precipitated where we are now, in an attempt to further secure the nation. Okay, so that's where this thing came from, essentially, and then passed through Congress further down the line. WITI was enacted in the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004. That act, WITI, under the act, met the enhanced security and increased facilitation across the border mandates. That was the mandate. So the thing we also need to keep in mind is that by presenting documents that establish identity and citizenship, we are also facilitating the inspection process at the border. And we're going to talk in the slideshow a little bit about all the documents that anybody from anywhere could present to an officer to establish who they are and what their citizenship is. And within that 30 seconds that the inspection is taking place, the officer has to make decisions. Well, that myriad of documents essentially is going to start being narrowed down to something that's more common. And it's going to be easier for the traveler and for the officer to meet the goal, facilitate and secure travel. So again, this first phase is not WITI, it's the transition phase, it's the educational phase. The 31st of this month should be a non-event. We were talking the other day, and our Canadian visitors at our main port of entry in Champlain are at 79% for presenting passports, which is a final rule WITI compliant document. Our U.S. citizens that cross through the main port in Champlain are 77 or 78% presenting U.S. passports, which is perfect. That's going to be what they need when this goes into final implementation. So out of our remaining 20-some%, the vast majority of those travelers are carrying birth certificates and a driver's license. So that it's actually a very small number of travelers that we are concerned are not going to have something that would establish identity and citizenship. Okay? I would recommend that anybody that's here get one of these tear sheets. The first one on the left. This has the latest information on what needs to be presented and at what time. Okay? Very straightforward. All right. So let's go ahead and do the slideshow. One thing, at about the 5th or 6th slide, that there's a mention in there about passport cards as one of the WITI compliant documents. Like I said before, Ms. Marshall will, I'll discuss a little bit, but it's a State Department issue essentially, and she can come up and give you further details of what they are. It's kind of a neat thing. So Western Hemisphere travel issue. The 9/11 Commission, they recommend that Americans should not be exempt from carrying biometric passports or otherwise enabling their identities to be securely verified when they enter the United States, nor should Canadians or Mexicans. So we are expecting that our own people comply with this as well as aliens, non-US citizens. And Whitty was part of the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act. Identifies a security vulnerability posed by document exemption and the myriad of travel documents presented at U.S. ports of entry. Okay. Just an example. Various driver's license from any province, any state, birth certificates, if folks have them, you know. We see on any given day birth certificates. I don't know if the birth certificate from Kansas, if it's good, bad, or not. I mean, I'd have to go in and use my references, and that's going to hold people up. So the idea is that we're going to come with more streamlined documents, fewer options, and we are able to accurately determine identity and citizenship quicker.
Question,
Yes.
will a birth certificate copy be acceptable in the future at the border?
Yes.
Yes.
As of the 31st, when we enter our transition phase, until the final implementation of Whitty, photocopies of passports are acceptable. They don't need to be notarized. They don't need to be certified. So if you're going to be filing an application for a passport or a passport card, or an enhanced driver's license where you're going to be required to submit your birth certificate, you may photocopy it first. And use that when you travel with a government-issued photo ID, and you are in compliance during the transition phase. Yes.
What specific information are you looking for on birth certificate?
What are we looking for?
Yeah.
Names, place of birth, date of birth, verifying that with any kind of photo identification that would be presented.
Because in Canada, they have a smaller version of
They do.
the original.
Those are acceptable as well.
So the father and mother's name doesn't have to show.
No. The wallet version of the Quebec birth certificate is satisfactory. Yes.
From where I come from, there's a number of elders who were born at home in Canada. And the difficulty with that is not being able to obtain a birth certificate because they were born in a hospital. That's what we're experiencing right now.
Okay.
In that case, when an elder approaches the border and does not have this,
Okay.
it's because they're unable to obtain it.
Right. We're talking North American Indians?
Yes, sir.
All North American Indian band cards and cards issued by the Indian and Northern Affairs Canada will be accepted
Mhm.
during the transition phase as long as they have a photo attached.
Right.
So-
I have another question towards that. What
Yes.
you're saying. There is also another, our traditional people do not recognize, will not state their citizenship. They're neither Canadian nor American.
Right.
That's another issue that also will appear at the border.
Right.
Our traditional people will deny any citizenship. And they have their own card. And from what I've read in this paper here, they're not going to recognize a card that's issued by that government.
During the transition phase, they will not be refused admission as long as they are determined to be otherwise admissible and determined to be 50% or more North American Indian. That's the first thing. Are you 50% or more North American Indian? Whether or not you have a document that states that really doesn't matter. It assists in the inspection. But if we're satisfied that you are 50% or more born in Canada, you're otherwise admissible anyway. During the transition phase, if we are satisfied that that person is otherwise admissible, they're not going to be refused admission simply because they don't have a document that establishes their birth. Does that answer your question?
That's during the transition phase.
During the transition phase,
After the transition phase.
I can't totally address that, but what I will say is that DHS and various tribes and the Indian and Northern Affairs Canada are working to produce an enhanced tribal card.
I know about those because I'm on a committee that deals with.
We're working in that, towards that end. Where those negotiations are, where things stand, I don't know. But our information is that they're working to produce something that would satisfy DHS's requirement under Whitty final implementation as being an acceptable travel document for recognized North American Indians.
But there again, too, we could make all the cards we want, but we still have a group of traditional people who will say, I don't need anything, it's my inherent right to cross that border freely, and I will do so.
I can't,
There again,
that's going to be a policy question. That, really, that's neither here nor there. When I was in my training last week in Washington, when certain questions were brought up, they weren't even, from us, they weren't even addressing them, or answering them, or even acknowledging them, because it wasn't relevant. We're not there yet. I understand that there are concerns in that regard. But I'm hoping, and I think we probably are all hoping, that between now and the final implementation, some kind of agreement is worked out in regards to that enhanced tribal card.
Like,
Anything else? We're going to talk, there's another slide that's going to be very similar to this in regards to what it is that people need to bring. Our mission: fulfill statutory mandate to verify the identity and citizenship of all travelers entering the U.S. Essentially, U.S. citizens and Canadians have been the only individuals that are exempted from presenting that kind of information. It's always been possibly an oral declaration. After September 11th, it's amazing, people started getting passports, people started traveling with their birth certificates. So our position is that, and it's based on the fact that people want to comply. They do. They want to do the right thing. They want to make it easier. They want to make sure that, geez, you know, if I am going to be at the border, I want to produce a document that I'm going to need or that they want to see for me to get back in. Goals: achieve the operating capability to verify identity and citizenship of all arriving travelers, focusing on achieving two primary goals: security and facilitation. That's what it's all about. We need to make sure that those people that should be coming in, come in, and doing so with more efficiency, facilitating that entry. Scope: enhance current capability by implementing facilitative technologies to verify, authenticate, and pre-position document information to CBP officers. That is in reference to RFID technology, which will be coming to a port near you this year. Nexus fast cards already use that kind of technology, but the enhanced driver's license, the U.S. passport cards are going to be RFID compliant, meaning that the information contained in the card will be transmitted upon your arrival in the inspection booth automatically. So in theory, there will be no exchange of documents. So there's one step that's been reduced during the inspection process right there. It's a little bit complex, and this really isn't the scope of what I want to talk about. I want to get to the heart of the matter, basically what we need to travel. But we are changing technology, the way in which we do business. This is a major investment for DHS and Customs and Border Protection. They're spending a lot of time and money in training our people, as well as upgrading our technology, our primary systems, our computer systems, to bring us into basically using state-of-the-art systems to assist us in moving traffic and securing the border. Okay? Critical facts: integrated land border management system with which all planned future travel document initiatives must comply. So the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative is going to be the base. The intention is that anything comes after that must comply with that base. Okay? This is one of the largest investments of CBP. Approximately 7.1 U.S. citizens on the southern border and 4.6 million U.S. citizens on the northern border lack Whitty acceptable travel documents. I'm sorry if I've been blocking you from this show. That is why various entities have been working to come up with alternative documents to passports. And that is why we shouldn't be referring to Whitty and the final implementation as the passport date. Because for many folks, in these local communities, whether it's in Quebec, Canada, or upstate New York, you may not need a passport. I mean, you may be spending money for something you do not need. An enhanced driver's license or a passport card may do the job just fine. This is, we could spend a long time talking about this, and this is where we need to concentrate our efforts. Currently, Canadian and U.S. citizens are exempt from any requirement, any document requirement of the land board. Okay? Oral declarations. Beginning on January 31st, verbal decks of citizenship alone will no longer be accepted. It should be a no. Will no longer be accepted. Winning compliant documents or a government-issued photo ID and proof of citizenship will be required beginning January 31st, 2008. And we will talk about winning acceptable documents. Winning acceptable documents, we'll talk about this. And the government-issued photo ID and proof of citizenship options, what we're talking about there. Children under the age of 18, Canadian and U.S. children who have not reached their 19th birthday will only be required to present birth certificates or photocopies of their birth certificates. Okay? So, if you have a school group that intends to go to New York City for the weekend, and there's a lot of concern that, well, geez, all the kids, they're only 14 years old, all they've got is their birth certificates. During the transition phase, until final implementation, no problem. Come on down, bring your birth certificates.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
On the birth certificate, are you going to accept photocopies? Because I know kids, and the birth certificate might go missing if it's the original one,
Yes.
that'd be a problem.
Absolutely. They need not be certified or notarized. A photocopy will be acceptable. And that will become the officer's job to do an inspection and determine that you have the person whose birth certificate is. Yes.
How is this gonna work for children who pass through twice a day on a daily basis to the school day?
I'm sorry.
Pass the
to go to
border
school.
on a daily basis to go to school. In my community, the border runs right through the territory.
Right.
We have 3 schools, 3 on the US side. And on the Canadian side, we have residents who live in Canada who send their
Right.
kids to school. We have, they live in one area, pass through the US and come back to Canada.
Nothing will change. What are they presenting now? Bank cards?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
Nope.
They will not be refused solely because they have nothing. They will be not denied entry. But our officers will be giving a verbal and written advisory on what documents are required for everybody, whether Canadian, North American Indian, or U.S. Birth certificate. If they have a photocopy of the birth certificate, that satisfies it. It's that simple. Okay? We talked about the North American Indian travel card with photo ID. That's good. The press release issued December 3rd, 2007, I believe that is one of the press releases that I brought with me. In any regard, if you have this tear sheet, you have acceptable documents as of January 31st, 2008. All those documents are fine, whether it's a passport, a Nexus card, a FAST card, North American Indian travel card with an affixed photo. Those are all fine. Driver's license, birth certificate, Quebec healthcare card with a birth certificate. Yes,
If I'm a commercial driver and I do have a passport,
yes.
can I use this as acceptable documents if I'm not driving a commercial vehicle?
Yes. With a Nexus or a FAST card, You do not have to be in a Nexus or a fast lane. So if you're going on vacation with your family and you have a fast card, you can get in the regular traffic lane and present that. That is acceptable.
Let me make a quick comment too on fast cards, because I haven't gotten any public approved release of this, because I know that you guys are here. The phase coming in where the fast card's gonna be updated, because the fast card, the way it is right now, is not truly a WIDI compliable document. We're going to take it. The people that are coming up on their 5-year anniversary to get their new card, they're gonna be issued the new fully WIDI compliant document. However, because there are so many of them, it's probably going to create a bit of a backlog in applications because it's the full process again. Every 5 years you go through the full process to be vetted again to make sure there's nothing new in your file that would otherwise make you ineligible for the program. What I'm going to try and get out, and I'll try and get a document to you to share, is the face value expiration date on the card will not matter. If they pass by that date and they have an appointment and they have not been revoked, we are still going to accept that document, even in the fast lane. Okay, so I'll try and get you something. But that is a very important thing because I'm sure I'm going to hear from drivers worried that their card is going to expire in a week because those drivers that have it now, they never forget that document. They don't like to go anywhere without it. So I'll try and get something to you, but they will be able to be accepted beyond the expiration date.
The same with the Nexus cards too, they're gonna be updated as well. I think most Fast and Nexus drivers over the last 6 months probably have received a flyer or memo requesting that their information be verified, so that when the cards are produced, they can be, gotten out.
The same criteria that applies to going into Canada as from the US.
We can't speak for the Canadians.
I was gonna say, I know that.
We can't speak for the Canadians, but from what we were advised, the Canadians have no intention on changing their SOPs. But again, I'm not a spokesman.
Can you tell me what the qualifications? I see you have a handout for Nexus, but when I'm talking to my constituents, what are the qualifications to get a fast or a Century card? Are they different? I mean, do you have to qualify somehow? I mean, being a business traveler?
They are different. They are different. The fast card is specifically made for commercial drivers. And there are different qualifications that go along to get a fast or an excess card. I don't want to say one is easier or harder to get, but the fast card has a different vetting standard than does the Nexus card. They are working, headquarters is working on a new one procedure for all of these trusted traveler documents is what they're called. That has not come yet, but right now, Nexus has what they call, I hate to use the term zero tolerance, but it almost has a zero tolerance situation where an arrest record, those sorts of things would make you ineligible at this time for a Nexus card. I wish I could give you more on how they're going to change that or when they're going to change that, but that has not been made aware to us yet at our level. The fast cards, however, have a vetting process where it's in stages, and there are so many things that you can have counting towards an overall score. Once you get that score, it's decided then if you're under the score, you're okay. If you're above the score, you won't be able to get a document. Century card is something for the southern border only. Century is probably something you're going to see get pulled together in with the overall commercial document. I haven't been told whether that's going to be called a fast card or a Century card, but it's being worked on. If anybody had any specific questions about that, we can get them in touch with the enrollment center, either here or in Montreal. Okay?
So all of these listed documents are WIDI acceptable documents under final rule of WIDI, okay, which goes into effect after the transition phase. WIDI may be, final implementation of WIDI may be as early as June 1st, 2009. During the transition phase, again, keep in mind that we need to establish identity and citizenship. So during the transition phase, you may present driver's license and a birth certificate. Any form of government issue photo identification and anything that establishes citizenship, primarily being certificate of birth abroad, birth certificate, naturalization certificate or photocopy of a naturalization certificate. Yes?
Under the enhanced driver's license, again, it says proposed, that's
Right.
something that's not theoretically where you can go to DLIs, I mean, your DMV right now won't do anything.
Next slide talks about that. Good question. That is probably going to be a viable option for many people in the US and in Canada. Because the Canadian provinces, some of them are on board as well for enhanced driver's licenses that are witty acceptable by DHS.
I work at the city taxi, we got about 31 drivers, and they're always squawking about a commonality for this. Sounded like maybe that might be a possibility.
Well, with the enhanced driver's license, they will still be issued by each state, and they will be unique to some extent in that regard. However, they will have to have certain features, security features, as directed by DHS. So it's not going to be a universal document like the passport card is going to be. That's going to look the same. The only thing that's going to be different is the bio and the picture. But the document will be the same. Okay? Yes?
For those of us who cross the border on a green card, is
With
that
what?
on a green card?
Yep.
Is that sufficient, or
It
what
is.
do we need? Just a green card is sufficient?
That's correct. If you are a Canadian citizen, permanent resident of the United States, the requirement for you to present valid evidence of permanent residency remains the same. And that may be in various forms, generally
The green card.
in the form of the card, but it may be a stamp in the passport, or it may be a temporary card. That doesn't change. If you're a permanent resident and you've got your green card, you're compliant with WIG. That establishes identity and citizenship. So you're good to go. Under final rule. Any questions about where we stand on the 31st of January? Yes?
Can I assume that if the birth certificate is written in French, it's acceptable?
Yes. Are you talking birth certificate or?
Quebec birth certificates are issued in French, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Enhanced driver's licenses issued by states. They meet the standard of establishing identity and citizenship, minimum security standards. They're facilitative technology. They have a machine-readable zone. Looks like your green card probably here. And they have the RFID chip. And there's a uniform processing and method of validation for CBP officers. We have a couple of different options in the inspection process to retrieve information from that card. One thing that we want to stress, in any document you have that has RFID technology, that chip, if by some chance somebody were to be able to access the chip, it's just a series of zeros and ones. That's a code that only our computers can translate. So your personal information is not going to be able to be read by somebody that can gain access to the chip, because it's still coded inside there, and only our readers will be able to see that information. There's a lot of misinformation out there in that regard as well. Washington State sent a memorandum of agreement with DHS in March of 2007. They will begin producing their enhanced driver's license in January of 2008. So we will start seeing them at the border. They establish citizenship and identity. Basically, when a state signs on with DHS to produce an enhanced driver's license, they have come up with a program that is in compliance with those 4 mandates from DHS, and it's an approved program for them to issue the enhanced driver's licenses. British Columbia is developing an enhanced driver's license program within the Canadian framework. Ontario, Yukon, Manitoba, and Maritime Province are in discussions, and I believe Quebec is as well.
Yes.
So that is another option. Enhanced driver's license meets final WIDI implementation guidelines.
And New York, of course, had signed their agreement in October.
Right.
And our understanding is that they are working on the actual document and that it may be available as early as this summer.
Fees, et cetera, don't know.
Set by the states.
Yeah. But it may be, again, another option for somebody that isn't necessarily going to be flying anywhere. Again, the land and sea implementation of WIDI in these documents, an enhanced driver's license and a passport are not valid for air travel. If you're going, is that correct? Not valid for air travel in any regard, right? Okay.
PassCard is not available for air travel according to the documents that you have here.
Right.
I don't know about the enhanced driver's license.
They're not.
They're
They're
not.
treated the same.
You have
Yeah.
to-
Even
Oh, that's right.
to
yes.
board a plane in Montreal and fly to New York City, you cannot board a plane with an enhanced driver's license or a passport card. You need a passport.
Now, that's only though if you're crossing the border, right? You don't need a passport if you're traveling in the United States.
Now,
No,
we're going to
no.
talk a
That's
little
if
bit
you're
about
crossing the border.
real ID.
Yeah, that's
That's
different.
That's real ID.
That's a whole different.
Essentially, we've also got the Real ID Act up there, which was another 9/11 Commission report recommendation. Because the people that hijacked those planes had various driver's licenses and various names from various states, and they were all legitimately issued, well, fraudulently obtained, but they were issued in good faith by the states. The idea is that under the Real ID Act, states will have to start producing a document that is issued to people that are here lawfully. Lawful presence is the standard. Under enhanced driver's license, citizenship is the standard. So under Real ID, you can be a permanent resident, non-US citizen, and get a New York State driver's license that meets the definition of a Real ID. The consequence of not having a Real ID driver's license is not being able to board federal regulated aircraft, not getting access to the Social Security system, not being able to enter federal buildings, etc. The idea is that an enhanced driver's license will meet the criteria for a real driver's license. So that if you go to your DMV and you get an enhanced driver's license, you'll then be able to get on an airplane with that driver's license. You'll be able to get into a federal building with that driver's license. And the brochures all say nuclear power plant if anybody wants to get their use your
I was
real
gonna go there
ID.
next week.
Yeah. So, that may be a reason why somebody, even if they have a passport or a pass card, for an extra $10 or $20, would go ahead and get an enhanced driver's license the next time they renew it. Because if I don't have my documents with me and I have a driver's license, I can just run up to Canada and with coming back. If I want to go to Florida, I need to take my passport to board the plane because my driver's license, my enhanced driver's license meets the criteria for Real ID. I cannot board the plane in Plattsburgh to fly to Florida.
But you have to have a passport in order to get that enhanced license.
Well, yes, you have, not necessarily a passport, but you have to prove, one of the criteria is that you have to establish U.S. citizenship.
So no, you don't need a passport to get an
Right.
enhanced driver's license. You
You
need
need to
proof of
prove your
citizenship.
citizenship, your U.S. citizenship. And in Canada, when they begin producing their enhanced driver's licenses, again, it's going to be under the criteria established by DHS. It would be only available for Canadians. So they would have to establish their Canadian citizenship, their identity. There's a whole series of things that the people that apply for these are going to have to submit. In the program, will have to meet DHS's requirements as well, making sure that the people that are doing the interviews and the people that are vetting the applicants are themselves legitimate. All those security aspects have to be taken into consideration. Yes.
The essence of our discussion has been about U.S. driver's licenses. Can you, or perhaps Mr. Bachand, inform us about what's going on in Quebec to have, to get people across the border more easily? Because it would seem that that's all of our concern in this room, those of us that cross the border regularly between the United States and Canada, and those of us who depend on Quebecers' businesses when they come across the border.
That's why we're here. That's why we're reaching out. We encourage anybody with accurate information to spread the word. There isn't going to be, a terrible day on the 31st of January. We have a reasonable amount of time until the final implementation of WITI to get the word out as to what documents people are going to need upon final implementation. That's what this is all about. The next 17 months are informing the public, telling the travelers. We're doing it in these sort of venues. I'm sure we will continue to do this. We're doing it at our ports of entry as well.
Can you tell us what's going on in Quebec right now?
I cannot. I'm sorry.
Can you,
I can't speak.
Mr. Bachand?
Yes, I can tell you, listen, the WHDI for us was very important, and it was a big issue. As a matter of fact, I was in Washington a few times to meet with congressmen and asking them to not require passports for the borders. And finally, we were quite happy when they said, well, maybe we're going too fast, let's wait here. So there's a border caucus in Ottawa, which is formed by members of parliament from each party. It's the same in the United States. As a matter of fact, they have a border caucus in the United States also.
Congressman McHugh is on it.
What's that?
Congressman McHugh is on it.
Yeah, Mr. McHugh is on it. And of course, we're going to be writing now to the Premier of Quebec asking him, listen, and he was a strong proponent of not having a passport, Monsieur Charest. So now that there's a partial victory, I think we should have to make sure that we accelerate the enhanced driver license in Quebec. So we're at that point now. We're going to be writing the minister, the premier, and we've got non-members of the bloc, which is my party, that are along the border in Quebec. And we're going to be asking the premier to make sure that they accelerate that enhanced driver license, because it has impact. I mean, there's a lot of Canadians that come here, hockey players, all sorts of people, and they sometimes they can't afford to pay a passport. There's a lot of family that can afford that, and American families also. So if we have this instrument, I think it will be very valuable for everybody, and we're going to be asking the premier to move rapidly on it.
The good news about that, sir, if I don't mind adding on, is there is already an established working relationship between the two governments with some of the border accord issues, such as these trusted traveler documents. These documents are issued on both sides of the border in conjunction with both governments working together. So I don't think we're that far apart from this. I just think there's a lot of things that need to come down infrastructure-wise in states and in provinces on how they're going to do this. But I don't think it's that far away. Like I said, there's already a history there. There's officers right now from CBSA and CBP working at the border here in Champlain, working together, implementing these documents that are going to be WITI compliant and that are FAST and Nexus cards. So I think we're getting there. So again, there's a lot of nuts and bolts that need to be worked out.
The reason I asked the question is because I've seen Governor Douglas on television a lot talking about the border, but I haven't seen Governor Spitzer on television a lot talking about the border.
Well, as you know, we can't comment on that.
Yes.
Just to be sure, these requirements have nothing at all to do with homeland security at the airports, as long as you're traveling domestically in or out of the U.S. Is that correct?
The real ID requirements have been pushed back until 2014.
That's for domestic air travel in the U.S.
Right. I think the first benchmark deadline for states to begin producing real ID is December 31st of 2009. And the idea between December 31st, 2009, why they didn't go January 1st. Anyway, why the time lag between the end of 2009 and 2014, DMVs would be overrun. People would be flocking to get real ID driver's licenses. So the idea is that we spread it out over 4 years. And that the mandate in 2014 is that anybody under the age of 50 that wants access to a federal building that will be flying in a federally regulated commercial airline will have to have a real ID. The enhanced driver's license, if you get one of those, will satisfy the real ID aspect as well.
So domestic air travel is going to change and move closer to what WHDI requirements are.
Not real ID and enhanced driver's license are two totally different things. But the idea is that if you obtain a real ID, an enhanced driver's license, it is real ID compliant as well.
I think the intent is to overlap where they can, but of course states are going to be up to their own.
Real ID is not a travel document like an enhanced driver's license is, however, they're not interchangeable. Okay? So while an enhanced driver's license is a real ID is not an enhanced driver's license. You can't go to Canada with a real ID, but you can get on a plane and fly to Florida from the United States.
Wesley predicted that this would lead to this question. There is a lot of information out there on real ID though.
There is. If you simply Google real ID, there's anything you want to know. There is a slight connection here and in our worlds, but it's really not a border issue real ID, other than an enhanced driver's license will suffice as real ID for whatever internally you need a real ID for. Yes?
We talked about crossing the border during the transition period for under 19, and all they need is a birth certificate. What happens after June 1, 09 to the under 19?
They will also need to be in compliance with one of the WITI acceptable documents.
Every child in the car, mom and dad have, is going to have to be special.
That's the way it is right now. Again, we're not there yet, so that may change. That date may change, I don't know. That is what we have right now, so that's what we have to go with, but the reality, when it actually is implemented, is another thing.
Because obviously, some children aren't going to have the option of the enhanced driver's license, so will there be a specific separate document, or are you telling me you don't know that yet?
I don't know that. I don't know if the states will be producing an enhanced state identification card for those who are not of age to drive. I don't know.
And that's really going to impact our schools, go back schools into Native American. So
I don't
that's a
know.
concern.
I can't answer that. I don't know what the states are going to be doing in that regard. I know that federal documentation would be a passport card, which is much more reasonably priced, or a passport, Nexus card. All those things will be available. But at the state level, I don't know what the intentions are. Any questions on this before we move on? We're getting there. We're almost at the end. Communication is the goal. Again, we want to be perpetuating accurate and concise information out there. We want and hope that you folks will do the same. That this is what I found out, this is what we need to know. It's not the end of the world. Raise awareness and build support for WITI among affected travelers, U.S. and foreign officials, Native American communities, and industry stakeholders. And educate all travelers and any of their parties on U.S. documentary requirements. Once people understand this, I think that it's probably not as bad as some of the young truths out there. Ensure CBP personnel have current information to provide the traveling public. We've got these that we're flooding our travelers with.
And if you have an organization that you represent or whatever, and would like to have some of these things, you can provide a certain number of them, although we can't give too many away because, again, we're putting them out at all our ports, and that's quite a bit, so.
If you're gonna take them, you can photocopy more than.
Absolutely, sure.
Crazy copies if you want.
Go crazy, the better, the more the better.
How are we gonna do this? Just like we're doing now, we get media, local, regional, be a key stakeholder in travel, trade, and tourism, be our websites, and those intergovernmental partners like State Department and Department of Commerce, be a CBP call center team. The CBP call center team is a number, if you are interested, I can give it to you. Basically, where you can make comments about your experience at the border, find out information about what you need to travel, what you can bring back when you travel, what the documentary requirements are. And with our partners in Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Yes?
Is it fair to say that at the end of this month, you will no longer be asked what your citizenship is?
No.
Okay,
That will still be part of the inspection.
okay. And so the average person crossing the border then should be prepared to answer questions, but then hand the documentation for everybody in your car to the officer?
That's correct.
Don't misunderstand that still the meat of the business that's done at the border are human beings talking to one another. This is only to somehow help us determine who at least is in front of us, so then we can better pinpoint our questioning. That's the intent of a lot of this.
Where you need to go. Because you don't need to go certain areas where everybody crosses. Yes?
So I go to the dentist in Hemingford and I cross over at Moore's.
Yes.
So you're telling me in this transition period, I can still bring my driver's license and a copy of my birth certificate and be okay? We don't have any dental insurance, so it's more economical for me to go up there to the dentist.
That's right. That's great.
So
100% yes.
driver's license doesn't have to have the seal on my birth certificate?
Yes.
In the very beginning of the passport requirement, there was a statement from a principal in the North Country that said, if all of my students have to have passports, there'll be no more field trips to Quebec.
I'm going to address that.
No, I just asked you to convey to the powers that be, and I know you'll convey to the powers that be, that there needs to be a very minimal financial requirement for students to cross the border. And it can't be so difficult that people won't say, we're not taking our students to Quebec anymore, and people from Quebec won't say, we're not taking our students to New York anymore.
Again, this is not a passport requirement. You don't have to have a passport. You won't have to have a passport under final implementation of WITI. There are other alternatives out there
For those less than 18.
for anybody.
Okay.
Anybody that doesn't want to get a passport, can't afford to get a passport, doesn't think it's a good idea, they have other things that they can do. And
It was
that's
just
one of the
very
things
scary
we
when
want
that
to put out
first came out, and I'm glad to hear what you're saying. Thank you.
This is my contact information. No problem sending me any correspondence, any questions, any issues that you have.
This is the most important thing here, because before you cancel a trip, or change your plans, or do anything because you think you understand what needs to be done, and you're not quite sure though, call this number, okay, please? That's why we do this, so there isn't a lot of misunderstandings. I learned a little bit about this when we implemented the new commercial procedures at the court. We worked with Julie and some people at the MCQ in Canada and that, and there was a ton of misinformation going around. I got flooded with phone calls and emails every day, but the good news is people got the word that ask, don't just assume, and then talk at the Tim Hortons that morning saying, well, I know I can't cross the border because I don't have this. Call and ask. That's why we got Wes here. There's some other folks at the court as well. Okay?
This is the main Bobby number. You can ask me, no problem. If you're told that I'm not available, ask for another duty supervisor. Yes.
The term travelers, I'm assuming now that assumes that's everything. That's commercial, organization, government, traveler means everything.
Anybody that flies to the United States.
There's a little more work to do with just the general public segment. The commercial environment, they've been gearing up for this for a long time because they've always had to produce a lot of official documents to cross the border all the time. So the only thing that this is a big change for is the general traveler on both sides of the border, so that's why more of this. And we do plan on blanketing more and more organizations with this information. I know in my trade processing group, when they send things out, some of their regular correspondences to companies that may or may not even want this information, we're putting these tear sheets in those correspondences. We're going to places like the AAA companies. We're going to be sending things to school boards and to people who, put together school groups and those things. So, we're going to try and blanket the information as much as we can. But this is a start today. So if you think there's somebody that can benefit from this information, by all means, get them in contact with us.
Any other questions for me before Ms. Marshall addresses passport card? Yes.
All right, just a quick question.
Yep.
Case sensitive, the dots count on either side of your initial, there's no
The
spaces.
dots count, but it should not be case sensitive. You have to have those periods there or else it won't go through. You have to have the middle initial as well. Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Marshall?
Good morning. I don't want to take a lot of time. We've already talked a little bit about the passport card, but since that is the responsibility of the U.S. State Department as opposed to the Department of Homeland Security, I was asked if I would speak a little bit about it. We heard what was being said at all of the meetings along the border back in 2005. And one of the biggest issue, particularly in New York State and Vermont, was school trips. And we understood that. We wanted to find another way. And one of the things, obviously, is passport card. But there has been an agreement that, and I need to reconfirm this, but that school trips will be exempt from having to have a document as long as there's some kind of proof of citizenship of the children, and there's a list that the school will be responsible for. The problem is, as the principal of an elementary school in Derby Line told me, their children, 80% are on the school lunch program, which tells you that it's an economically depressed area. The requirement under the rules of the State Education Board are that if one child cannot go on that because of lack of money, then the school has to pay whatever it takes so that that child can go on it. And if the schools told me that if they have to do that for their students, they can't do that because they don't have the budget to do that. So all school trips, all of which go north into Canada, would have to stop. And for many of the children, there's the Granby Zoo, there's Park Safari, there's Montreal and all the cultural things, and that's the closest site for any of that kind of activity that you would normally include under an educational trip for children. And so they came to an accommodation for that, because there's no way that the school board in Derby Line could pay. So the real reason I'm here, of course, is to talk about the passport card. It's only good for cross-border travel by land. You can't use it if you want to fly from Burlington to Toronto, say. You'd have to have a passport for that. It's going to, if you've never had any kind of documentation, never had a passport, it's going to be $45 for the first time. For a child, it would be $35 for the first time. If you've had a passport or currently have one and you want to renew it as a passport card, it will be $20. So the price is, you're not going to have to pay almost full price. In other words, it's so that it will be an easy document for people along the border, or primarily along the border because other people tend to fly. They can use it, it won't cost that much, they'll be able to travel easily. It is all the same documentation is required for the card as for the actual passport. The difference is it's a card, it's the size of the driver's license. You can go across by land but you will have to have a birth certificate or a naturalization certificate or something that proves your citizenship for the U.S. government to issue it. Our passport agencies are going to issue it. We will be taking applications in Canada, in Montreal, and in all of our consulates for Americans who want to have a passport card so that they can go back and forth across the border from Canada into the United States. We're trying to make it as simple as possible. Starting February 1st, we will be accepting applications for these in Montreal. The thing is, we don't expect the first cards to be issued by the U.S. passport agencies until sometime we hope in April. But you can apply ahead of time. We want you to apply ahead of time because we don't want everybody coming in on the 1st of April and saying, now that you're actually issuing them, we want one. So if you're thinking of having one, you want to do it, come early. That way our staff will not be completely overwhelmed and you'll be the first on the block with your passport card. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I have a question. The cost for this U.S. passport card for children is something of concern to me. I represent the people of the North Country in the state legislature, and I think the same applies as your school over in Derby Line. We have many small communities and families cross the border to enjoy the cultural experiences with their children. And is there any opportunity between now and when these final plans are implemented to give consideration? Maybe the test would be if your child meets qualifications for reduced school lunches, that maybe that passport card wouldn't have to be $35. Certainly, families who have 4 children, sometimes even if you have 2 children, that's a huge amount of money, and it's going to preclude families from crossing, and we want to encourage our families to be able to have those experiences together. I would ask only that we continue to look at the affordability for families to cross this border. We've had these wonderful opportunities for families to do so. I know, I have children who have, one of my daughters has 5 children. This is going to be a big task for some of our families. So please take that back as a real strong concern.
I will let Washington know that. But what you all have to know is that by law, we are required to do cost of service studies. And based on the cost of service study, we have to charge a certain amount. When they did a cost of service study on passport issuances and what a passport card would cost, they came out with $35 for the card. And that includes what's called the execution fee, and that's where all the post offices that accept passport applications and will be able to accept the passport card applications as well. The post offices are charging us for that ability. For them to do it for us, they're in effect a contractor to the State Department, and they have to be paid. How we're going to get around that, if we can get around it, that's the big issue. But people do understand that it is an issue in many places along the border, and for anybody with a large family. I would prefer that we not have this, but it's not a choice of the Department of State. It's a requirement under federal law right now. And if we can get the price down, we will. But right now, that's what they're working on. Are there any other questions?
I was asking because kids under 10, just say, what kind of investigation do you do on a kid under 10? How much is it? How could it cost as much as an adult? In Quebec or in the U.S. or because you got the custom card, that's okay. But there's a difference between a kid under 10 that, what takes back a kid under 10? Besides making it hard.
I hear what you're saying and I understand it. But for them simply to be an acceptance facility and then forward it on to one of our, depending on where they are, which passport agency it goes to, for example, if you're in certain parts of Pennsylvania, it goes to Philadelphia. Here, it goes, some of the things in Vermont go to the Vermont Service Center. So we have various and sundry places where it goes to. And no, I mean, if you've got 4 children and 2 are over 10 and 2 are under 10, there's no difference in the adjudication process. It takes the same amount of time. They're trying to figure that. They've tried to figure it out. Somebody figured out that it costs about 37.5 cents a month to have one of these cards, as long for as long as delivered. That's not a lot. I understand that in certain areas that's and size of family that becomes larger. I'm taking all this information back to Washington, but I can't give you an answer of why.
But again, children can travel, under 18, they can travel with just a birth certificate, right?
Under transition.
Just during transition?
And then what?
And then what?
Already compliant documents. Passport card, passport, Nexus card, pass card.
In Quebec, young children, you do have insurance card. You don't have any picture on it, so it's not required document.
If they haven't reached their 19th birthday yet, there's no photo identification required.
And for school trips, I will reiterate that the school will have a responsibility so that the children are not going to have a card, they're going to have some kind of document from the school.
That's even after the temporary
That's my
period expires.
understanding, but again, I will confirm that with Washington.
There's some confusion out there too about the Quebec healthcare card. And that's a government issued photo ID for witty transition standards. But it does not confer birth in Canada. It doesn't mean anything other than you are authorized to receive medical care.
I need with birth certificate.
For an adult, anybody over 19 or 19th birthday, and that would be acceptable with birth certificate.
A lot of our Quebec travelers give us the healthcare card. So they'll be asked for more identification with that to establish citizenship.
I'm sorry, could you reconfirm the first time price on the card without passport?
The first time for an adult is $45. After that, or if you have a passport and you want the card because it's more convenient to carry with you on a regular basis, then it is going to be, I want to confirm this. I don't want to give you the wrong number. For 10 years, first time, no passport, you're getting the card, it's $45. If you have a passport or have had a passport and there are records of it, it's only $20. And what you're doing is you're applying for a renewal, as they call it. For children, if it's the first time, it's $35. And it's good for 5 years, the idea being that a child at 5 doesn't necessarily resemble the child at 11. If the child already has a passport because you've traveled somewhere, then it's $20 for the card as well. Are there any other questions? You're always welcome to contact the consulate in Montreal. We'll be working on this for the foreseeable future, and Paul Mayer, who's sitting in the back frowning, is the head of our consular section in Montreal. So it's a good name to remember. It's Paul Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R.
Just like a good boss, right there.
Mary, I would commend to everybody's attention, if you want more details about the passport card, there's a very fine handout with a lot of...
Right over here on the table is are copies of that, and it
Yeah.
does give all the information about the prices and everything.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
We
everyone,
appreciate it very much.
for coming, and thank you for providing all of the information for us. And the press conference will begin in just a minute, please.
And if you haven't gotten some documents, get some. If you want a few extras even, grab a few extras. Pass them out to your friends, your family, whatever. Border Patrol there.
Galvin Castine with a familiar face to people in the northern tier, Mr. Claude Bachon, Minister of Parliament.
Member of Parliament,
Member of
which
Parliament.
was your equivalent of congressman. Yes.
In the riding of the St. Jean Richelieu area.
Yeah, your neighbors, northern neighbors.
For those of you who are long-time hometown cable viewers, we first bumped into Mr. Bachon back in 1997. Bob Ben and I, 3 days before Bob died, went to the Saint Jean Baptiste parade and met this gentleman.
You had a great time there, didn't you?
We did. We had a heck of a good time. And apparently the Saint Jean Baptiste parades aren't as big as they used to be, though. So I'm kind of disappointed in that.
No, well, there's bigger ones in Montreal, of course, but in Saint Jean, the tradition is easing down. I don't know why. We'll have to restart that, especially if our American friends are interested in coming over. We'll have to do another parade every year.
I think I went to one in Lacole that year. There were a lot of them, but they seemed to die down after that.
Yeah.
Now, I know you and the representatives on this side of the border from Vermont and New York have been battling this rules and regulations. It's not like when you and I were growing up and you were coming across to the Saxony and I was going up to the Windsor. And the
Exactly,
Richelieu.
you're right, yes.
You know, we didn't worry too much about that border, but now it's a whole new ballgame.
As a matter of fact, it was a big concern to us because this tradition of coming here and you coming to our places without having to present all of these papers and costing us a lot of money. So I did head a few delegations in Washington to meet with the congressmen, especially the one in the central parts, because the one on the borders, like you told us, knew about the issues and they didn't like that because they knew they would have negative impact on their economy. I think we're on the right track now. I think Washington has heard the message, and I'm also a co-chair with the Border Caucus for the Canada, and we meet with our co-chairs fellows from the United States. Everybody was preoccupied by these new measures, and so now I think we're on the right track because they won't be, requiring passports only. A lot of these little families, a lot of these students couldn't afford the cost of a passport. So now if we have some kind of another piece of identification, which is not too costly, and we'll make sure that will not be costly. So I think it will we'll make sure that this flow of you coming in and us coming on your side will be maintained, and our economy won't be too much negatively impacted by that.
Yeah, we're looking right here. We're in Plattsburgh right now, and since the Canadian dollar skyrocketed, the people in Canada have been coming across. I live in Champlain, and we have a new Price Chopper store there, and you pull in that parking lot, and there's as many Quebec plates as there are U.S. plates.
Yes, so it's important for you, it's important for us to make sure that these people are not, pushed away from the borders. We have to make sure that they transit with facility from one side to the other. And I think now that Washington has heard our message, I think we're on the right track.
Do you think it's well enough known on your side of the border what the rules and regulations will be very, very shortly?
It's not well known. That's as a matter of fact, that's why I'm here today. I mean, I've taken a lot of notes. I knew most of the things, but today I'll be going back to my writing, and I'll be explaining to my people in the media what has happened here and what are the requirements and the transition phase and when it's going to be the final phase. I'll explain that to them, and as a co-chair of the Border Caucus also, I'll make sure that in my own party, everybody along the border knows what's going on. And I think that's why we did that Border Caucus, as a matter of fact. It's not only Quebec, it's all over Canada, but it's co-chaired by the different political parties, which are four in Washington. And of course, in the United States, there's two. There's the Republican and the Democrats. So these kind of issues we discuss very often, and we make sure that the good faith and the people are going to be still traveling from one side to the other without too much harassment.
Now, have you talked to people in your immigration, Canadian immigration? Are they going to change their regulations at all for people heading north?
I don't think so. I mean, immigration is one thing, but public security and homeland defense is another thing. I think we have some policies concerning immigration which are not really the same policies as the Americans. But as it is for crossing the borders, this is very important that we should be on the same page, because we have to make sure that everything will be functioning normally. And that's why we have to look at your rules, you have to look at our rules, we have to send our teams of negotiations, and we have to make sure that everybody knows what's going to be going on one side or the other, and then we'll have the appropriate piece of identification that we need to make sure that everybody will be satisfied.
Now, one thing I heard today was that from somebody from the U.S. side, if we cross into Canada and we don't have our birth certificate with us after January 31st, they're not going to stop us from coming back if we don't have it, because I was wondering what they're going to do. If we go across and we're in Canada, and we live 5 miles this side of the border, they're going to keep us in Canada, not let us come home?
Well, if you want to spend your money and your time in Canada, well, you're more than welcome.
Well, that's where all my ancestors came from.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I'd be going home. But it's awfully handy. Like next week, I'll be going up to the auto show in Montreal.
Absolutely,
and kids. You take the kids over to Parc Safari, and it just.
Oh yeah. That was our main concerns, as a matter of fact, schools and families, because there are families on one side of the border and the other part of the family on the other side of the border. These people could have got separated for a while, and I don't think now that will be the case, and that's perfect for everybody, I think.
Well, I think it will be to a certain extent. My mother was a Trudeau, and she has cousins in the Canadian side, and she's 83 years old, so chances are she's not going to do anything that would allow her to cross the border. So if something happens to her cousin and she wants to go across there, or vice versa, it just probably won't happen, because that generation, it just. The old generation has a view on it, but the new generation now also they're really great travelers. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember in my generation we were playing from one town to the other town hockey. Today they go from one continent to the other continent. So we have to make sure that when they do that, the security purpose is there, but also the fact to travel without too much harassment is also very important for them.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think now we're on the right track, and we're going to get at it.
I'm going to keep working on it.
Yes.
All right.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
You take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah, goodbye.
That'll conclude Hometown Cable's look at this, the new regulations. As was stated several times here, they cannot really tell you what's going to happen after June 9th of June of 2009. Things could change a dozen times between now and then. The important thing we have to remember is what's required between now and that point, this what they're calling a transition phase. And if you have any questions, it sounds like they're more than willing to answer them. So, Hometown Cable's coverage of the press conference here at the Chamber of Commerce in Plattsburgh. Thanks for watching, and for those who support Hometown Cable.